Hello everybody, it's the Eastern Master Offenders back with another video. A different video. Today we're starting a new series. The last time we did a true series was Engines of MBTA, which I'm also planning to do a remake on in the future. But this series is going to be called Talking About Random Railroads for 5 minutes straight. The first episode is the Penn Central.
One of the greatest railroads in history. 50 years of great railroading. The Penn Central.
Yeah, that Penn Central. So basically, this video is going to be split up into 3 to 4 parts. If anyone doesn't know what the Penn Central is or doesn't know anything about railroads, because if you know anything about railroads, you probably know the Penn Central. We'll talk about that first. Then we'll dive into the beginning of the Penn Central, how it formed. Then we'll go over some of the locomotives they used, and finally we'll end off at the ending stages of the railroad and eventually Conrail. Alright, so for those of you that don't know what Penn Central is, it was basically a merger between 3 of America's largest railroad companies, the Pennsylvania Railroad, the New York Central Railroad, and the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad. They merged together because if they didn't, they all knew that they would probably go bankrupt. However, during this merger process, a lot of corners were cut, which most likely led to the downfall of the Penn Central. And eventually, that did happen, and in 1970 they went bankrupt, barely a year after they were founded. However, they still ran for 6 more years before being absorbed into Conrail in 1976. Okay, now time to talk about the origins of the Penn Central. So, the Penn Central was founded on February 1st, 1968. And as I said earlier, it was the merger of the 3 railroads, the Pennsylvania, the New York Central, and the New Haven Railroad. Now, all these railroads combined together because they were losing a lot of money, and they thought consolidating their operations into one would be a better thing to at least somewhat preserve American rail. Although it did end up being preserved by Conrail. Although that's an entirely different story. But anyways, the Penn Central, during the merger process, they cut a lot of corners. Some steps were done way too late or just not even done at all to properly secure the merger. So sometimes some freight trains could get lost on the system, like they didn't even know where it was going, or there was very bad internal communication, and also they were using aging equipment because they had no money at the time, so they couldn't really buy any new equipment. They were also forced to operate passenger trains for 2 years until Amtrak took over. Well, actually, no, that would be 3 years until Amtrak took over. But anyways, back to the freight lines. There was a big mistake. It was a big mistake in the merger process, not finishing communications and stuff. One of the biggest examples of faulty communication was in 1969 or 70, where the main potato harvest was brought down onto the Penn Central. However, there was However, everything in the Penn Central at that time was deadlocked. There was no space or anything, so the potatoes just sat there to rot. And eventually, that ended up cutting a lot of the Bangor and Aroostook's business, which about 25 years later led to them eventually going bankrupt. So basically, because the Penn Central's merger process was so bad, they basically ruined an entire different railroad for a completely unrelated reason. So, Penn Central's locomotives were primarily made up of three locomotive manufacturers: Alco, Baldwin, and EMD. From Alco, they had some of the Century series and also some of the Alco FA series, some Alco switchers like the RS3. They had some S1s, S2s, S3s, S4s, and a couple T6s mixed in there. Mostly what they had from Alco was either road switchers or lesser horsepower cab units, or some yard switchers as well. Mostly what they had from Baldwin was switchers as well, although I'm pretty sure Penn Central got at least a few shark noses mixed in there, but mostly switchers. EMD is a bit more broad. They had some of the E units, E7A, Bs, E8s, and then they had some freight units, F3As and Bs, F7As and Bs, FL9s from the New Haven, and also some FP7s. They also had a lot of Jeeps, GP7s, GP9s, GP9Bs, GP20s, GP30s, GP35s, GP38s, GP38-2s, and some GP40s in there as well. Those were the primary locomotives that Penn Central had during their somewhat short existence. Okay, the downfall of Penn Central. Here we go. So the downfall of Penn Central basically started, I guess, all the way back when they went bankrupt. And they were operating money losing lines for 6 years. So it's obvious that they wouldn't be, I guess, making money, being profitable. Luckily, a huge weight was taken off their shoulders in 1971 with the creation of Amtrak. They gave their passenger units and their passenger coaches to Amtrak. So now they didn't have to operate any passenger trains, which I think was a big bonus for them. But that couldn't really save them. In the years leading up to Conrail, Penn Central was a failing business. It was just a disgrace to look at. I mean, you had awful trackage, yards were filled with soot and it just looked disgusting. Operating conditions were awful. They had aging equipment. Even when they gave their passenger stuff away, they still had many aging units on their fleet. And they might have gotten new units later, like maybe they got GP38s or GP40s. Maybe they bought a few new units somewhere in there, but those were few and far between, basically. The point that I'm trying to make is Penn Central was not doing good. Their operations were in shambles, and when the federal government decided to make Conrail to subsidize freight service basically all across the East, Penn Central was pretty keen. So they handed over their service, and that was it. No more Penn Central. Honestly, that was probably a gift, because the Penn Central was actually pretty trash. Like, I haven't really said it that much. I mean, I've said it, like, describing it, but I haven't really said it. But I'm gonna say it now. The Penn Central was complete and was a complete and utter failure. It was awful. Like, so bad. Like, it's hard for me to even explain, because I don't really even know the full extent of how bad it really was. But I guess it was really bad if I can't even describe it. So, I guess that actually wraps up the video. If you guys could like and subscribe, that would be well appreciated from me. And I'll see you out there trackside.